Vampire, Vampire. Multiple inbound tracks bearing 184, marked as a threat. Codename Sebastian. Inside the Combat Information Center of the Arleigh Burke-class destroyer USS Carney, the red battle lights signal that the entire shape of the Persian Gulf has changed in an instant. This is no exercise. It is 2:14 in the morning, and the USS Carney has just been caught in a targeting radar lock from the Chinese Type 055 cruiser Nanchang. At this moment, everything depends on one decision. One move could turn the Gulf into chaos. The right move could end the encounter before it fully begins. The crew had been waiting for a target. 40 miles off the Iranian coast, the Chinese-flagged freighter Zhenhua 20828 is ignoring every international hailing frequency. It is pushing through the water at 22 knots, heading straight toward the Iranian port of Bandar Abbas. According to intelligence, those containers are not carrying heavy machinery. They are believed to be carrying YJ-18 anti-ship systems, the kind of advanced hardware that could completely change control of the Strait of Hormuz and put the U.S. Fifth Fleet in extreme danger. The ceasefire is only 12 hours old, and right now it is being held together by one fragile hope: that no one makes the wrong move. But the USS Carney does not hesitate. Instead of answering with hard interceptors, the tactical action officer chooses a different kind of response. The destroyer's AN/SLQ-32 V6 electronic warfare suite comes alive, flooding the battlespace with electronic noise. The system focuses on the Nanchang's S-band and X-band radar arrays, trying to blur the Chinese cruiser's ability to track the Carney's exact position. On the bridge of the Type 055, the Chinese commander watches his tactical display break apart into static. But the Nanchang is a 13,000-ton giant for a reason. Its dual-band radar system begins jumping across frequencies, searching for a clean signal through the American interference. While the two warships trade invisible blows across the water, the real move is happening 15,000 feet above the waves. Two F-35C Lightning II jets, launched 20 minutes earlier from the USS Gerald R. Ford, are racing toward the intercept zone. They are flying clean. No external fuel tanks, no external munitions, nothing hanging under the wings. Their radar-absorbent skin keeps them hidden from the freighter's commercial radar and makes it incredibly difficult for the Nanchang to establish a firm track at this range. The pilots are receiving the Carney's sensor feed through the multifunction advanced data link. Inside their helmets, the F-35C pilots see the battlespace through the distributed aperture system, a full 360-degree infrared view projected directly onto their visors. To them, it is almost as if they are looking straight through the floor of their cockpits at the Zhenhua 20828 below. Then the Nanchang begins a high-speed maneuver, placing itself between the USS Carney and the freighter. It is a high-stakes game of maritime pressure, played with ships worth billions of dollars. The Chinese commander is making a calculation. The United States will not risk a direct confrontation with a Chinese sovereign warship. Most people see a shipping container and think of a delayed order, a holiday delivery, or a new appliance. But crews in the Fifth Fleet see something very different. A 40-foot steel box that could carry enough advanced anti-ship systems to change the balance of an entire carrier group. Anyone who has worked the docks or taken part in a visit, board, search, and seizure operation knows that feeling in the gut when the cargo does not match the manifest. And if you have served on an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer or aboard a carrier, drop your whole number in the comments. We want to hear from the veterans who understand that real control of the sea is often decided in the details the public never gets to see. You do not have to remove a cruiser from the fight if you can simply make it unable to read the fight. The Nanchang believes it has the advantage. It carries more vertical launch cells than the USS Carney, and on paper, that matters. But this encounter is not being decided only by numbers. The F-35Cs activate their AN/ASQ-239 electronic warfare suites and begin generating false radar signatures. On the Nanchang screens, it suddenly looks as if 20 American aircraft are coming in from different angles at once. The cruiser's automated defense systems begin chasing shadows, shifting their fire control attention away from the USS Carney. And that is the opening the destroyer has been waiting for. Inside the CIC of the USS Carney, the weapons control prompt turns green. The forward Mark 41 vertical launch system hatches snap open. But these cells are not loaded for defense. Inside them are SM-6 interceptors, each one worth roughly $4.3 million. The United States is not targeting the Nanchang directly. That would push the situation into a completely different level of escalation. Instead, the target is the chain of control. The mission is simple: stop the freighter, keep the Chinese cruiser distracted, and prevent the situation from spreading beyond the point of no return. While the F-35Cs keep the Nanchang locked in a digital fight, the commander aboard the USS Carney gives the order. Batteries released, sequence A1. A column of fire erupts from the deck as the first SM-6 launches into the night sky. The missile clears the ship, its booster separates with a sharp crack, and it begins a high-arching climb into the upper atmosphere, saving energy for the final descent. Once the SM-6 leaves the launcher, the time for negotiation is over. It is now moving at more than 2,600 miles per hour, around Mach 3.5. At that speed, the missile's force alone is enough to tear through steel like paper. It does not need much to create total mechanical failure. On the bridge of the Genoa 20 A28, the crew has less than 30 seconds to understand what is coming. Their commercial AIS system is useless against something moving faster than they can react. The SM-6 is now communicating with the F-35Cs. The jets provide mid-course corrections, guiding the missile like quarterbacks directing the final play. Then the SM-6 dives. It drops at a steep angle, locking onto the heat signature of the freighter's massive diesel engines. The impact sends a violent shock through the ship. The first SM-6 punches through the stern, destroying the steering assembly and taking out the propeller shaft. A second impact hits near the engine room, cutting power across the vessel and throwing the entire freighter into darkness. The Genoa 20 A28 is not going under, but it is no longer part of the mission. It begins drifting in the heavy Gulf swells, listing slightly to port, unable to steer and unable to continue toward Bandar Abbas. At the same time, the two F-35Cs drop low and scream over the Nanchang at supersonic speed. At just 500 feet above the water, the shockwave rolls over the Chinese cruiser like a physical warning. Glass rattles, systems shake. Every person on that bridge understands the message. This was not a strike. It was a reminder. The Chinese cruiser stops its aggressive turn. Now the entire standoff has changed. One cruiser is struggling to see clearly, and one freighter is dead in the water. But the operation is not finished. Fast roping onto a disabled ship in the dark is one of the most dangerous moments in any maritime mission. The smoke from the impacts has barely cleared before the next phase begins. An MH-60R Seahawk lifts from the aft deck of the USS Kearney and moves toward the freighter. Its rotors thunder over the water as it closes in on the container ship. Inside are Navy SEALs and a specialized Coast Guard maritime safety and security team. The Genoa 20 A28 looks like a ghost ship. Its lights are out, its engines are silent. The only sound is the heavy roar of the helicopter above the deck. The boarding team drops onto the container deck, boots hitting the corrugated steel in the darkness. This is the point where advanced systems and long-range sensors no longer matter. Now it comes down to training. The first team moves toward the bridge. Then a door on the companionway bursts open. This freighter was not crewed only by merchant sailors. A dozen armed private security contractors in Chinese patent tactical gear rush into view, carrying QBZ-95 rifles. Tracer rounds cut through the darkness in bright orange lines. The U.S. boarding team reacts instantly. They deploy flashbangs, flooding the corridor with blinding light and overwhelming sound. Under cover of the confusion, the SEALs move with controlled precision. They use controlled covering shots from suppressed SIG MCX carbines to keep the contractors pinned against the bulkhead. Within 4 minutes, the armed security team is brought under control, disarmed, and restrained. The U.S. boarding team moves fast. Using a hydraulic breaching tool, they cut through the SEALs on the primary cargo hold, the one intelligence had marked as the priority container. There is no worse feeling in an operation than opening the door and finding exactly what the other side wanted you to find. The heavy steel doors swing open. The boarding team sweeps their lights across the cargo. They are expecting to see the distinctive 20-foot launch canisters associated with the YJ-18 system. Instead, they see pallets, thousands of them. Command, this is Lead Element. We have visual confirmation on the cargo. The SEAL officer steps forward, cuts through the plastic wrap on the nearest pallet, and pulls out a box. The label is printed in Mandarin and English. Medical-grade saline solution. The next pallet is filled with industrial water pumps. The one after that contains generic engine gaskets, marked for civilian power plants in Iran. Command, there are no advanced systems here. I repeat, no weapons cargo found. This is a humanitarian shipment. Back inside the Combat Information Center of the USS Kearney, the silence is absolute. They have just disabled a Chinese-flagged vessel, spent millions of dollars in precision interceptors, and launched a boarding operation on its deck, only to discover medical supplies and civilian equipment. And then, at that exact moment, the ship's AN/SQQ-89 V15 sonar suite picks up something else, a faint, low-frequency rhythmic pulse. It is 50 miles south, hugging the Omani coastline in shallow water, where land clutter makes the surface picture harder to read. The contact is a refurbished Iranian tanker named the Sia. It is running dark. No lights, no transponder. Engines muffled by specialized hull coating. The realization hits the crew like a physical shock. The Zhenhua 20 A28 was never the delivery ship. It was the decoy. China knew U.S. intelligence was watching the pier at Ningbo. They wanted American satellites to see the YJ-18 canisters being loaded. But under cover of a routine bunkering operation in international waters, the real cargo had been transferred to the Xia. The Chinese freighter had been used to pull the U.S. Navy into a legal, diplomatic, and tactical trap. While the boarding team was searching medical crates, the real shipment was slipping through the Strait of Hormuz. The commander of the USS Carney does not wait for a legal debate. The destroyer's bow rises through the dark water as it accelerates past 30 knots, cutting hard through the Gulf swells. Now they are racing the clock. The Xia is only 10 miles from Iranian territorial waters. Once it crosses the 12-mile line, any direct move against it could trigger a major international crisis. But the Nanchang is not finished. Despite the damage to its bridge glass, the Chinese cruiser maneuvers with frightening speed. It uses its 13,000 tons of steel as a moving wall, cutting across the USS Carney's bow and forcing the American destroyer into a hard turn to starboard to avoid impact. The two warships are now less than 100 yards apart, running at high speed in the dark. Every time the USS Carney tries to break left toward the tanker, the Nanchang mirrors the move, blocking its path like a defensive lineman cutting off the lane. On the bridge of the USS Carney, the crew can see Chinese sailors through the damaged windows of the Nanchang. One wrong move from either helm, one late engine response, one misread command, and both ships could become twisted wreckage in the Gulf. Then the infrared feed shows the moment no one wanted to see. The Xia, the real carrier of the YJ-18 systems, crosses the 12-mile line. The Xia disappears into the radar shadow of the Iranian coastline, and the moment it does, the Nanchang breaks away. Its engines slow. Its bow turns back toward the disabled freighter. The Chinese commander did not need to win the confrontation. He only needed to win the minute. China did not simply lose a freighter. It gained a permanent reason to enter the Persian Gulf. Within 6 hours of the incident, the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs releases high-definition drone footage of the SM-6 impacts and the injured security personnel on deck. The video is edited cleanly, framed perfectly, and pushed across every major platform. Beijing calls the U.S. Navy's action a violation of the fragile ceasefire and presents the Fifth Fleet as an aggressive force operating outside the rules. The escalation does not end with a larger conflict. It ends with something far more permanent, a shift in geography. Claiming that it must protect humanitarian shipments from future incidents, Beijing announces the immediate deployment of a permanent naval task force to the Persian Gulf. Then comes the move that changes everything. China signs a 99-year lease for a logistics support base at the Iranian port of Bandar Abbas. The U.S. Navy disabled a freighter, but China used that freighter as the foundation for a permanent strategic foothold in the Middle East. They proved they were willing to sacrifice one ship to gain access to an entire region. In the U.S. Navy, we often say we own the night. But this operation proves that owning the night means very little if the other side owns the story. The USS Carney performed with the precision expected from American sailors. The F-35Cs proved why they remain among the most powerful electronic warfare platforms in the sky. But the failure described in the sources was not a failure of sensors. It was a failure of imagination. The U.S. saw the target it expected to see. The adversary created the target it wanted us to chase. One side played for the tactical win. The other played for the map. The U.S. won the encounter, but it lost the geography. As the Chinese Navy expands its presence in the Middle East, one question becomes impossible to ignore. Was stopping those containers worth the strategic ground that was lost afterward? In a world full of decoys, the most dangerous threat is often the one you were too focused to notice. If you want to understand how the YJ-18 system actually works, the system the US thought it was stopping, click the video on screen now. And to the men and women standing watch in the Fifth Fleet, keep your eyes on the dark. The next move may already be in motion. Stay safe. Disclaimer: this video is a dramatized scenario created for educational and storytelling purposes. It is inspired by publicly available information about real-world naval capabilities, regional tensions, and modern military technology. Some elements are hypothetical and should not be understood as a factual report of real events. The events, dialogue, and character perspectives shown in this video are fictionalized to help explain how such a scenario could unfold.